Hi, I'm Kevin Lipkin. I'm the head of the Roca robotics team at TCGplayer, and we'll be talking today a little bit about automation technology and how that can help you save money and save time.
Yep. Awesome. Right, so the title, if you can read the slide here, right? So let's talk a little about the drawer of doom. How many of y'all, I want to show hands, have a drawer or a box? I call it the drawer of doom, but this thing that like your staff doesn't want to get near because it's like cards that need to get processed. Oh my gosh, yeah, see, that's the thing. So what Kevin and I wanted to do is put together a little content that talks about the tools that we have at TCGplayer that you guys can use to manage the drawer of doom, work it down, make it disappear if possible, prevent it from becoming a room of doom or maybe a dungeon of doom, because that happens. And if you do have that situation, what do? We have some ideas, and so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Right, so what we're going to cover, kind of 5 beats. So first, just kind of a broad stroke of the life cycle of the singles inventory, right? And the key tasks that we see involved in that. A little about the common workflows for processing what we call small batches, right? And then our recommendation for the most efficient workflow for small batches, and then a couple of different like use case variants for you guys as well, putting that in different contexts. And then Kevin's going to talk about processing large batches of inventory. So once that drawer has become a box or boxes or a room or rooms or a dungeon of doom that's really out of control, Kevin's got ideas for you. And lastly, recommendation on the most efficient workflow for large batches. And that's all fine and good, but what aren't we going to cover? Wait, hold on a second. I got a thing. Let me do this first. So I want to ask this question, guys. Once you buy a card, how much does it cost you to list it? Who knows the answer? Give me an idea off the cuff. Anybody? Yeah? The price of your labor. Exactly. So if you can reduce the amount of labor that you spend, is it going to make you more money? Yeah. And that's it. So that's what we wanted to talk to you about, is how you can make more money. It's always going to cost you something, right? It's always going to take hands. It's always going to take maybe a little robotics assistance, automation. But the honest truth is that as long as you have a drawer of doom or a box of doom or a dungeon of doom, you've got opportunity, right? And while it's sitting in that drawer, it's not making you money. And that's a problem, right? So that's why we thought this was really important material and we wanted to talk about it, because honestly, not making you money is not helping anybody. It's not helping your customers either, because you might have product that they're looking for that unfortunately you don't even know about, and so you send them away and they go to the store up the street when you could have helped them out, and that's more money for you. So that's why we wanted to cover this today. So what are we not going to talk about, Kevin?
So everything we're talking about today is taking disorganized cards and turning them into inventory that's digitized, listed, and physically organized. That's just one part of the journey of selling singles for your business. Of course, once orders come in, those cards have to be pulled, they have to be shipped, your listings have to be priced and updated, and we're not going to get into that. We're just going to talk about all the steps in that journey from when you acquire the inventory to getting it sorted, organized, and listed.
Yep. I'll do that, and then you.
Yeah. So why are we talking about this today? It's because it's a difficult problem, it's a hard problem, it's an expensive problem, and it holds back a lot of businesses. A lot of stores I talk to have a huge backlog of cards that they haven't gone through, and it's not like they're about to start just digging into them. It's so difficult that they just don't bother, and it's a real constraint to growing your business. It requires expertise, it's expensive, and it's a challenge. So it's an important problem. We also have an interesting perspective on this problem because TCGplayer, we make a lot of tools to help businesses of all different sizes with this problem and to do it more efficiently. We also have some firsthand experience with this because we operate the Authentication Center. The Authentication Center is what powers the Direct program, the Sort program, the SYP program, where your stores can send us cards and we physically handle them. The Authentication Center last year shipped out on behalf of our customers over 38 million cards.
Woo! How many a day?
That's over 100,000 cards a day. So it's very high volumes, and we have firsthand experiences dealing with the same challenges that you do. And one of the really cool things is that we can experiment, we can try different things, we can learn, we can develop new tools, and then share those with our game stores and our partners and help you benefit from what we've learned. And that's a lot of what's motivating our perspective on this. So talking about just a high-level framework here before we dive into the specifics, really I want everyone to think about that task of going from disorganized cards into physical inventory, and it really should be a process. It should be a defined, measurable workflow of steps that you go through. And for that process to work for you and for it to be worthwhile, it's got to be efficient and cost-effective. It can't cost more than it's worth for you to do it. Otherwise, those cards are just going to sit there. It's got to be accurate. It's got to be something where you're not creating mistakes all the time, having wrong cards in your inventory, and it's got to be something that you can really rely on to be accurate. It's got to require minimal expertise. If your process is based on having encyclopedic knowledge of every single card from every single game, that's really difficult to scale. It would be impossible for our authentication center to scale in that way. And again, if we're talking about growing your business and helping get further than where you are now, having a process that requires less expertise is going to be important. And then lastly, it's got to be dependable. It's got to be something that you can count on, especially when we're getting into higher volumes. It's got to be something that you can really rely on as core to your business. I'm going to get into a couple definitions here just so everyone knows what we're talking about when we say certain words that relate to processing singles inventory. The first is sift. And essentially, sifting, what we call sifting, is making a yes-no decision on each card to separate what's worthwhile for you to sell as a single and what's not worthwhile for you either to maybe not acquire or to process as a bulk pack, something like that. Each store is going to make a different decision about what's worthwhile for you to sell as a single. Some stores use a price threshold based on the value of a card. Other stores have a strategy of getting as much breadth of inventory possible so that when you're selling, you're getting larger cart sizes from your customers. Maybe you want to have inventory in store for your customers to have an incentive to come in. But you're going to have to make a decision on what you're going to sift out. But nonetheless, the definition here of sift is to make that decision, yes, no, on each card, and to physically separate the cards out into that yes, no pile. That's what we mean by sifting. Conditioning is pretty self-explanatory. Of course, TCGplayer has our conditioning guide, but to list a card as inventory, you do have to condition it, and that's a step in the process here. Digitize, what do we mean by that? That's taking a physical stack of cards and turning it into a list, a digital list that you can ideally bring straight into your TCGplayer inventory to have for sale. Maybe you bring it into your in-store inventory so you know what's in store. But it's turning a physical stack of cards into a digital list. And it's also important that it's associated with a catalog ID. So not only do you want to have a list of what you think the cards are, you want to have a list of what the cards are in, say, the TCGplayer catalog, so that you can easily bring that into your system. And then lastly, we're talking about sorting. And sometimes people say, oh, I sort my cards. I sort them into multiple piles. And that's generally not what we're talking about, especially when we get into high volumes of cards. We want to have our cards fully alphabetized. TCGplayer in our authentication center, we have a very specific order that we work with to be as efficient as possible. We have the cards sorted by set. The sets are sequenced in reverse chronological order. And then within each set, the cards are fully alphabetized. By having our inventory sorted this way, it makes it super efficient to be able to file new inventory in with our existing inventory, and it makes it efficient to be able to pull orders when cards, again, that 100,000 cards a day, when those 100,000 cards a day get ordered, we want to be able to go to our cabinets. We don't want to rummage through a stack. We want to be able to go and pull a specific card. So when I'm talking about sorting, I'm not talking about putting it into a couple piles. I'm talking about fully indexing the inventory, fully alphabetizing the inventory, and physically organizing your cards that way to match your existing inventory.
So is that sifting, Kevin, when we're putting it into piles and we're not actually organizing it?
That would be sifting, yes.
Okay.
If we're separating into piles, we call that sifting. If we're reordering the cards to put them into a fully defined sequence, that's sorting.
Right. So really when we looked at things and we talked to many of y'all from around the country, what we're finding is that we've got kind of two batch sizes broadly. So this is a little less, I would say the demarcation here is a little less about quantity of cards and a lot more about what I would say the motivators are driving the workflow completion. So if you're trying to do it synchronous, right, like in front of the customer has cards and they want to sell them to you, to your store, you need to generally process those on the spot or relatively quickly, maybe send them around the store for a minute and give yourself some time to process. But it's not a situation where you've got I would say, as much time as you'd like, right? If you're not compressed on time, that's really where you move into the large batch territory, right? So this is where things become a little more asynchronous. And some kind of use case examples to kind of help paint the picture here. So under small batches, we've got, like walk-ins and trade-ins. And you also have events, right? And events are really tough because that's where you've got this huge preponderance of small batches all coming in rapid fire back to back, right? If people are a draft event, right? If people are cracking a lot of packs and you want to be able to take in those singles and process those so you can give store credit, in turn maybe sell some more packs or boxes and rinse and repeat the flywheel, you need to do that quickly. So we've got a recommended workflow that I'm going to walk through that kind of gives recommendations based on tools we have available to help make that as fast as possible. So this is really about speed, and then this is more about efficiency, I would say, and accuracy, kind of the guiding principles that Kevin just talked about. Collection purchases, the room of doom, right? Accumulated backlog, that's the large batch space. Right, so generally speaking, all singles processing begins with sifting and conditioning. So we call this kind of, I would say these are the appraise and purchase components, right, of the overall workflow. All of this is happening kind of before the drawer of doom, right? So you're sifting, like Kevin was talking about. So you're kind of going through the product and you're saying, I'm going to pick this, like this is a valuable, this is a $3 or $4 card or whatever. I'm going to pass, right? This one doesn't really meet a need. I'm not going to see demand for this, so and this is bulk, right? So this is a price per 100, 1,000, whatever it might be. Conditioning then, and this is often done at the same time, perhaps. I'm picking this, and this one's a near mint. I'm picking this, and this is an LP, whatever it might be. You're putting those side by side on the table in front of you. And at this point, you might have value already in your mind. And if you don't, you might also be digitizing at the same time. So digitizing is then associating with catalog ID, right? TCGplayer catalog ID, I'll be specific in this example. And so that's actually saying, okay, so that near mint Tarmogoyf, right, is worth $350. I don't know if it is, actually. I don't know what our market price is there, but we'll pretend it's $350. And now you've created perhaps a list, right, of all the things in front of you. And at this point, you might tender the sale, but it's in the drawer. And maybe later you're going to come back and sort it, okay? And we're going to talk about the efficiencies that you can achieve here and try to work this down. Because again, the bigger that drawer gets and the more out of hand it is, the less liquidity that you have, right? All that opportunity is just sitting there and it's not earning money for your business. And that's not good. Right, so then this all ends with the inventory going into the filing cabinets. So it's ready to be fulfilled for orders down the road. Right. So now I'm going to walk through kind of the two broad stroke workflows that we have. So if you think about those 4 tasks that we just defined and you sequence those, these are, again, using tools that we have available today and what we'd recommend. So if you're using BinderPause, if it's a good fit for your business, there's a feature in BinderPause called the buy list. And this is actually a great feature for 2 reasons. And I know I've talked to some store owners in the room who use it today and they love it. And I have some recommendations I can connect you with store owners if you want to talk to them more specifically. But essentially this amounts to pushing the labor to your customer, right? So, and what's cool about that is the customer actually wants to do it because they're getting transparency ahead of time before they come into your store in terms of what they're going to get out of that transaction. That's kind of awesome, right? So you're building trust with them in advance and you're pushing your labor costs down, which is kind of awesome. Now what's going to happen is they're going to sift generally and sort. You can give them instructions in advance. They're going to build a cart of the cars that they want to bring in and sell you. They do this online through your BinderPause powered website, and then they submit the cart. You get a notification that you've got a buy list cart that is ready to be received. And then you can build some scheduling automation. I know some stores do this today. They might set up like a Calendly link where they can book time knowing that they've got staff available at that time. And this is great too because you get labor efficiency around knowing that you've got 10 buy lists coming in the morning and you can put people on that task, right? And that's great. it's a lot more structured than ad hoc people coming in the door, not knowing when they're going to arrive, and maybe having like an unknown kind of surge that you have to manage, which is kind of disruptive depending on the time of day and what you guys are doing. So now they come into the store, and they've got the cards that they said they were going to bring. You might do a quick QC at that point to make sure they match condition and make sure they're in the order that they said they were going to bring them in. And then with one button in Binder Pause, you can actually take that whole stack and add it to your inventory, and you can tender the sale. So this is massive efficiency in terms of labor, and just testing in batches of 25, 50, 100 cards. These are the timings that we saw, so about 2 to 21 minutes of employee time per batch, right? So super, super efficient. You might even find this faster than 2 minutes. That was just our testing, but it's pretty quick. Now, if you don't have Binder Pause, that's fine. If you use our TCGplayer mobile app, right, you can actually create a list, and you can take that list and you can upload it into either Binder Pause or, right now our dev team is working on adding the ability to directly import the output from the mobile app into Seller Portal. So that is a feature we're going to have available in Q2. So it'll be very similar to Binder Pause in that with a single click, you can move this CSV file that you got out of the mobile app into Binder Pause or Seller Portal. It's kind of great. But what you're going to do is follow a flow kind of like this. So the cards are going to come in, the customer's going to come up to the counter, you're going to condition, right? Because we've talked to some stores and they say, we don't take damaged. That's fine. Or we don't take heavily played. That's great. So first thing to do, maybe do a condition pass and then sift and say, I'm going to pass all this stuff. I don't want it. Or this stuff becomes bulk for me. Great. So now you're sifting. You're saying, these cards are ones I pick, these cards I pass, these cards I'm bulking, right? And then you have a rough sense of kind of like what you're looking at in terms of value. And you're sifting at the same time. Now what you can do is digitize. So one by one, put the cards in front of the mobile app. You can use your phone for this. It's pretty easy. And then when you're done, you can take that list and export it to a CSV file. And you can email that CSV file to yourself. And these are all features available in the app. And then when you receive that email, you can download it and you can upload it into Binder Pause with one click. And like I said, soon, Seller Portal. The last thing to do is make sure those cards are in the order that they need to be to go into the cabinet, right? Now, our recommendation is do that on the spot if you can. Don't save this for later, right? Because if you save that sorting for later, you kick the can down the road, that's creating debt for you you're going to have to resolve later. That creates the drawer of doom. That creates the room of doom, the box of doom. You want to manage that down. That's super, super important, right? We do see that this workflow, right, because you're doing all the labor and you're not moving some of it to the customer, it does take a little longer to do, but it's still pretty efficient. It moves pretty quickly. So, right, so in events, like I mentioned, you have a lot larger quantity of small batches to process in a small amount of time. And so in events, we do recommend you want to over-index on speed. And so a suggestion would be arm multiple staff members if possible, if you're able to do this during the event with the mobile app. And then have a system that you use for numerically identifying each one of those lists that they're creating in the app. And then have a Post-it or something similar that you can put on the stacks of cards that matches the naming convention in the list you're creating in the mobile app, right? So let's say employee number 1, right, has list 1, 2, 3. So it's like 1001. They put that on the Post-it, they slap it on the stack of cards, move it to the side. And now, if they're using the mobile app, they can say, you can have a sign behind you. I know many of you do. We pay 20% or 30% of TCGplayer market price. Awesome. You see what that is because it's in your list right in front of you. You can tender the sale, and you're done. You move on to the next. That line of like 10 customers waiting to get more booster packs before the event starts, you can process it pretty quickly. Great. Now, you've got all the lists. You don't have to upload those during the event. We recommend you don't. So the difference here between the last one is you're basically doing it post hoc, right? So schedule time after the event to have each one of the staff that has the mobile app up do their uploads post-event. And you can do that. It might take as much as an hour, but you get it all done, and then you sort and you file. And again, try to do this after the event. Schedule time for it intentionally, and that way you're not populating the drawer of doom, right? That's the goal. Cool. Next. Kevin.
All right, so Vince had some great tricks on how to stay on top of this, maybe have your customers do a lot of the work using the buy list to stop accumulating disorganized cards. But in reality, I know a lot of stores have a backlog of hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, over 1 million backlogged cards. Maybe they're in a storage shed somewhere. These actually looked pretty organized, but these are all cards in a storage locker. And they're just sitting there. They're not for sale. They're not inventoried. We don't know what's in them. And that's now when we're in a room of doom situation that we want to work through. So when we're talking about a workflow like this, it's even more important to have that process that's efficient and something that scales. So thankfully, to get through a room of doom, there's automation that can help with this. There's technology that can help with this. And I'll talk a little bit about the Roca sorter, which is pictured here. It's a robot that sorts cards, Magic and Pokemon, or we have a version for Yu-Gi-Oh! And the Roca sorter will scan the cards. It'll sift them, so it'll physically pull out the valuable or desirable cards for you. Or we have options to sort the cards, so it'll physically spread the cards out throughout the machine and then put them back in order, say set name order. It can even match the TCGplayer direct order that I described, the reverse chronological order. So it can sift, it can alphabetize, and it can digitize, giving you a CSV file that you can then upload into your inventory. So it helps with a lot of these steps. Now, I mentioned with the Authentication Center, with our Authentication Center, we have a lot of experience firsthand. These Roca sorters are the backbone of several steps of the process of being able to support that flow of 100,000 cards per day. And working, if you think about the sort program in particular, that's where disorganized cards get sent in to the Authentication Center. That's essentially a never-ending room of doom that gets mailed to us every day that we have to work through at a pretty high volume. So we have a lot of experience working through rooms of doom, just with working with game stores and doing it ourselves. In doing so, and with our experience, we've conducted a lot of time studies of measuring exactly all the steps to go through, exactly how much time it takes to go through each step in different circumstances. We've run experiments as far as let's try things in a different order. Let's try to use the Roca sorter in different ways or in different steps throughout the process. And we've had some conclusions there. There's some interesting trade-offs that emerge in running some of these experiments. And lastly, just some high-level operational expertise on lessons learned from operating our Authentication Center and deploying this technology over the last several years at high volume. So that's informing it. And I'm actually going to go through now the specific steps that our sort program goes through when we receive essentially a mini room of doom mailed to us every day, and we work through that. I'm going to go through each one of these steps here, but it's essentially a 6-step process. And it starts with intake. So we open the box, and there's a quick intake process that has to happen. The cards need to be de-sleeved if they're already sleeved. They have to be oriented so they're all facing the same way. Maybe Magic and Pokemon cards get separated out. And we separate foils out separately so that they're stored in inventory differently than normal cards. That intake process of doing that initial separation and de-sleeving, it's about 1 second per card to go through that. Next, the cards go through the Roca sorter, and we go through a sift and initial sort. I'm going to touch back on this in a couple of slides, but this is essentially the step where valuable cards are pulled out by the Roca sorter. They're physically separated out. And the Roca sorter at this step actually does an initial alphabetization. So it'll sort those desirable cards by set then name, as well as pulling out the valuable cards. We call that a Sift Sort, where essentially you have one run of cards that are valuable, and those are alphabetized, then a second run of cards that are not valuable, and the Roca sorter goes through that first step. That's 7.5 seconds of machine time per card in this first sort step, but it's only 0.3 seconds of labor time. That's the time it takes to load the tray, to unload the cards from the tray, put new cards into a new tray, start the process, press the button on the tablet to get it going. That works out to 0.3 seconds of time per card to run this first step. Now at this point, there's actually a flow chart. Cards that are below the threshold that we don't want to inventory, those we deem as undesirable, and with the sort program in particular, we have the option to send you those cards back. We can donate those cards. If you're running through this process, you might want to turn those cards into bulk packs or sell that off as bulk. But basically, those cards get sifted out and don't continue further through the process. Meanwhile, cards that we do want to get inventoried, they continue on to being conditioned. Our time studies show this is about 4 seconds per card to condition those valuable cards that we want to list as inventory. Once we have the cards conditioned, we know that they're valuable, we know we want to inventory them, we actually run them back through the Roca a second time for a full alphabetization. We actually group cards of the same condition together, and we group cards from the same sets together. So we have kind of several stacks of cards that we know we want to sort, and we try to group cards. Because they've been initially alphabetized and set sorted, we can group similar cards together in one 1,000-card run. And I'll touch on that in a second, but we're going to run and fully alphabetize a run of 1,000 cards back. That's 7 seconds of Roca time, and it's 0.3 seconds of labor time. Now we take the output and we go through a review process. I'm going to touch on this as well, but we want to review the output. If there's any cards that were misidentified or had low confidence, we want to make sure that we're addressing that at this stage. So we'll maybe move a card around, or we'll update the file prior to upload. But this is a check and fixing any cards that are low confidence or were not recognized. That averages to about 3 seconds of labor to essentially do a quality check coming out of the sort before it gets uploaded. After this step, the cards are uploaded into our Authentication Center digital inventory. So we now know exactly what cards we have. We're adding them to our inventory. And of course, they're physically sorted as well, so that they can be filed away. So someone's then going to take the cards to the shelf, to the cabinets, and physically integrate this new inventory in with our existing inventory so that it's ready there for fulfillment whenever those cards get ordered. They're all in one place in the cabinets. That filing process is about 2.5 seconds of labor per card. So this is all based on time studies of running through this process for our sort program, and it's very, very similar to a high-volume process that you might go through at your game store. So the impact of all this is, we're looking at about 11 seconds of labor for a card that goes all the way to the shelf, as well as about 14 seconds of machine time for any cards that go to the shelf. But we also analyzed, okay, how long would this take and how much cost would there be if we did this manually, if we had employees go through these steps, which we do from time to time in different contexts. And the end result is that by using automation, it's about 3 to 4 cents less of savings per card of using this automation. This includes the cost to operate the machines, all the labor to load and unload, electricity, things like that. And that's 3 to 4 cents of more efficiency per card coming in the front of that process. So that's pretty significant and is a key enabler for our sort program. In addition, by having the automation and by going through this process, it helps us check a lot of these other boxes too, and helps us really scale. So it's, of course, efficient and cost-effective. It's accurate. TCGplayer, we've seen that the number of customer tickets for customers receiving the wrong card from the Authentication Center have dropped by half by deploying this automation in various steps of the process. So really significant accuracy gains, which is really impactful. It also helps us scale and doesn't require our Authentication Center team members to be absolute experts in every single game that we're supporting. It's really helpful. And we've also found with our own team members and also working with game stores that employees really like working with this technology. And instead of spending hours and hours alphabetizing cards, they get to be a robot operator and put that on their resume and get experience working with the technology. So our team members and your employees get a better experience working with the technology, and it requires less game-specific knowledge. You're relying less on one of your employees having an encyclopedic knowledge of exactly what cards are valuable at any given moment in time, and you're pushing that onto the technology. And lastly, it's dependable. Not that your employees aren't dependable, and our team members certainly are as well, but the reality of being a human is you have off days, you're not always working at maximum efficiency, you get distracted. I think that the stat is that the average hourly employee takes 10 days of sick time off in a year. And in order to scale up a process like this, being able to depend on the automation is a real key. I will loop back and talk about a couple concepts here.
Hey, before you go there really quick,
yeah.
So you just talked about, Kevin, a whole bunch of, you talked about savings, right? So that's awesome. It's freeing up time for your staff. So now what, right? And I think something that we wanted to make sure we communicated is you're going to free up time for your staff to now go do other things. It's really good to have an idea. So if you're planning on implementing some automation or just changes to your workflows to free up time, as you start to see that time freed up, have an idea of what you would reallocate labor to. And if you can sit down and come up with tasks for your store as best you can, generalize them if you're able to, but put value on them, right? So of the things that need to get done in the store, how valuable are they relative to one another? And that helps to give you a sense of, okay, once the staff does free up, what would I put them on doing? So just a thought we wanted to plant a seed on.
Yeah. And if anyone happened to see Adam Sellner's, the gaming company's presentation yesterday, that was actually one of his key points is when you're thinking about automation, of course you want to dive into the dollars and cents, but it's not solely about, how can I do this a little bit more cheaply? It's also about freeing up time, and there's all sorts of projects and tasks that you or your employees could be doing to grow your business and be more successful. And by deploying automation, not only is it more efficient, but it's freeing up those valuable resources to deploy in other ways rather than sitting there alphabetizing cards. Thanks, Vince. Yeah. I do want to loop back to two areas of this flowchart in a little bit more detail. The first is this concept of sifting and sorting. This is going to be different for each game store and your workflows and exactly what you're trying to accomplish here. But essentially, I described that the Roca sorter can sift cards, and it does that at a speed of about 1,000 cards per hour. That's making a yes-no decision. Or it can sort cards, and that's changing the order, fully alphabetizing them. That's at a speed of 1,000 cards in 2 hours. So it's a little bit slower. It takes more machine time to sort and reorder the cards. Our authentication center has chosen to do this Sift Sort, where it's kind of doing that alphabetization step, an initial alphabetization step up front, and that does take more machine time, but it's organizing the cards more. Instead of just giving you a pile of disorganized valuable cards, it's organizing those valuable cards. And the reason to do that is because at this later step here of the sort, we can combine similar runs of cards. So by doing that initial sort, maybe 1,000 cards that are going to get turned into inventory, instead of spanning 70 sets that are going to have to go into different cabinets all over our authentication center, we can group together sets that are similar. So maybe I can file away 1,000 cards from just 5 sets, and I only have to visit one cabinet to do that. And that really cuts down on the filing cost. So it's a trade-off that we've experimented with. We've done time studies on it. And for our use case, it's actually more efficient to use more machine time on that first step to go through the Sift Sort, but we get it back on the filing because when we're filing 1,000 cards away, it's a much denser run of inventory from a smaller number of sets that we can file into one spot. Does that make sense? I know that's a little bit technical. For our use case and the volumes we're at, it's about how can we make this as efficient as possible and what's the mix of robotics and automation and labor to make this happen as efficiently as possible. If you're a game store and you have, say, one Roca sorter, maybe it's a little bit of a different trade-off, and maybe machine time is your constraint. And maybe it makes sense for you just to do an initial sift and then run those cards back through the Roca sorter later. So there is a trade-off here between machine time, labor time, and how much work the machine is doing at any given step. And we've played around with that for our own operations, and we can talk that through with you as well to figure out what makes the most sense and what those trade-offs look like for your operations. The other thing I wanted to touch on is this review step, this accuracy step. And I want to say that the robot is a very powerful tool, the Roca sorter. It continues to improve. We just revamped our Yu-Gi-Oh recognition to be much, much more accurate, and it continues to get better and better. So it's an effective tool, it's a powerful tool, but it's not a magic wand. It's not perfect. There are certain cards that are very challenging, and the companies that make these cards don't do us any favors with new types of cards that are very, very similar to old cards. So it's not a magic wand, it's not perfect, but it's still very, very good. So how do we review these cards coming out in a smart way? We don't want to just take the output and list it, because every mistake that happens whenever the wrong cards gets added to inventory, eventually that might add up having to refund an order. It's really sand in the gears to your efficiency. Getting this process accurate is very important. So we don't want to just take it and close our eyes and upload it. But at the same time, it's not efficient, and it kind of defeats the purpose to have to manually review every single card. So how can we focus our attention on reviewing the cards with the lowest confidence? How do we focus our attention on reviewing cards from kind of known sets or issues where we want to double check it? How do we focus our attention where a high value discrepancy might happen? How do we do this as intelligently as possible? And it's really informed my perspective on how important of a topic this is, and how we can make this process better, utilizing the fact and recognizing the fact that the robot is powerful but not perfect. And so we have a process where we essentially have certain cards that are trusted based on a couple different criteria, and other cards that are reviewed manually. Now, when we're reviewing cards, the robot is still correct the vast majority of the time, and it's very fast and efficient to just say, yep, I want to check this card, yes, this is right. It takes much longer whenever we uncover, hey, the robot thought this with low confidence, and actually it was this other one. We now have to update that file. So this 3 seconds is actually an average, and the vast majority of it comes from fixing those small number of problems. But essentially it's which cards do you trust, which cards do you quickly review, and then how often do you need to make a fix? And that's what averages into that time that's spent there to make sure that all these the results are accurate and can be trusted. And again, by implementing this, we've seen a huge improvement in accuracy over humans that are also not perfect. And we've been able to deploy this in an efficient way that does improve accuracy. I often get this question as far as, well, when does automation make sense? And if we're saying that by going through this process, it's 3 to 4 cents of savings per card, it's pretty straightforward math as far as if I just bought a Roca sorter, how many cards per month would I have to run? And if I run this many cards per month, when does the robot pay for itself? So we have different versions of the robot. We have the Roca Sorter Max. We have a Yu-Gi-Oh version, a Magic version. So this is a little bit simplified here. But the short answer is, that math isn't that complicated, and that's just looking at the cost of processing cards here. I do want to call out here, I looked and I pulled data of all the Roca sorters that are out there at game stores. We're approaching 300 Roca sorters out in the wild, and Roca sorters processed over 160 million cards last year, so they're being used in high volumes. And of those robots, the average robot sorted 60,000 cards per month per robot last year. So that's the average. And in that case, if your robot is running 60,000 cards a month, that pays for itself in about 12 months. Now, if you're running less than that, that's still great. Maybe your payback period is closer to 2 years. We do have customers that run the machines 24/7. Some customers, I think the highest I saw was a little over 200,000 a month average running through a Roca sorter, which is a pretty high volume operation there. But then it starts to get even shorter than these periods. And the robots can do that kind of volume. I also want to point out we offer a lease program. So maybe you're not quite at this volume. Maybe you're not in a position to buy the machine outright. You can essentially lease the robot, start making monthly payments, and you can be cash flow positive even in this 20 to 30,000 card range. And essentially the way the lease program works, for us at least, is you're kind of building equity in the machine, where the longer you lease the machine, the lower the buyout price is for you to ultimately own the robot. So you can get started. You can start to build kind of equity in the machine and lower the buyout price and be cash flow positive at these lower volumes. And then whenever the time is right, maybe you've turned your room of doom into listings and revenue, and you can buy the machine at that point. So it does make sense for game stores, but you need to be in the volume of at least 20, 30,000 cards per month for this to make sense. And then once you get beyond that, really outright buying the machine can become a very strong option. And again, this is only talking about the cost per card, not factoring in the fact that you're turning your room of doom into revenue, not factoring in freeing up your employees and yourself to go focus on other things, and turning this task of processing inventory into a repeatable, scalable process.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. Next slide, I guess. So just kind of wrapping up here what we talked about. So first up, like we talked about, batches can be either small or large, and really your differentiator there is whether or not you can process that batch. You have the luxury of being able to process that batch later, or if you really need to do it on the spot. Second, it's all about efficiency, accuracy, minimizing the expertise required to actually do the processing, and then dependability in the process, knowing that you're going to have consistency and repeating it day over day. Third, if you can, you want to let your customers do the work for you, right, using the binder pause buy list. 4 is when you're at events, speed is key, right? So you want to leverage whatever means necessary to be able to process large volumes of small batches at once. And then I'm going to pass it to you for these last summers.
Sure, just to quickly summarize here, deploying automation technology can make this a much more efficient process with 3 to 4 cents per card of savings. When you deploy automation, there are some trade-offs that you need to think about between labor time and machine time as you're going through this that you can think through. Quality checking and reducing accuracy is a big driver. It's really important, and there's ways to do it smartly and efficiently. And the average Roca sorter in the hands of our customers tends to pay for itself after 12 months. And then after that, it's really significant savings in higher volumes of sales and revenue and lower labor costs to go through all these steps.
Yep. Cool. All right, so we saved some time here at the end. Questions? Throw them at us. Yeah, I think I know the answer, Eric, but why don't you take it? Yeah, my lifeline.
So yes, you can delete your inventory. You have some options there. You can just flat out delete everything. You can delete sets, so you don't have to take everything down at once. So if you go into the back end, you can go into the inventory, not inventory tab, the pricing tab. And in the bottom left, you're going to see a nice little button to delete your inventory. Go through the options in there. Maybe start with one game, go through it. I would also suggest before deleting everything, download a CSV of everything so you have that as record too, and you can match it. That way, if maybe you have to do something else, you still have that record available to you.
Right, okay. Yeah, we're going to do that so we can kind of like see if something had been stolen or lost or whatever it is, and then we can kind of account for that.
Yeah, and if there is an issue and you need to kind of put things back to the way they were, that CSV file that Eric recommended, boom, you're done. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's kind of what we had intended, is it would go to your staged inventory just like you can with like a regular CSV upload that you do today in Seller Portal. In terms of sorting too, like you could theoretically take that CSV export you get out of the mobile app and you could sort that CSV, like picking columns, sorting it and then pushing. I don't know if that would help you with your workflows, but versus like sorting it within the app itself. I would say that we are absolutely looking at more ways to make it easier for your inventory to get ingested, either via the app or like any of our tools. I think that needs to be a big focus point for us going forward. I mean, Kevin and I, when we put our heads together to put this content together for y'all, our realization was a reminder, right, that I think there's big opportunity for us to make the tools better. So that's definitely in the roadmap. In terms of specifically, like, is it going to be in the mobile app? Is it what's going to happen with Quick List? I don't really have good answers on that. It's really just, it's going to be better. It's got to be. Yeah.
So specifically with Roca, Roca started as Magic only, and then we expanded into Pokemon, and then we recently, last year, finished expanding into Yu-Gi-Oh! So we do want to continue to expand the number of games that we support. Just to be candid, the challenge that we run into and one of the constraints is with every new set release, we have to run a software update. We have to make sure that we're handling whatever curveballs are thrown with the new set. So we want to get ourselves into a position where we can make these timely, high-quality software updates for all these new sets. And that's what's holding us back today from just supporting more and more games. But that said, that's the intention, is to continue to expand. I don't have a time frame, unfortunately, for what the next game is going to be and what that is. But that is the intention. Customers that had, game stores that had the first Magic Roca sorters, once we supported Pokemon, it's a software update. Now you can load Pokemon cards through your machine as well. So that is the idea, but unfortunately I don't have a date for you or a kind of firm sequence laid out.
Kevin, is it fair to say that we look at market volume across the product lines and probably prioritize R&D and investment based on volume? So it's reasonable to say, like, the product lines that are moving the most for y'all consistently, and I mean across everybody, every seller, those are the ones we'd probably invest in next. So.
Sure. Our lead times right now are about 3 to 4 weeks. for our Roca sorter, and then we're coming out shipping a Roca sorter Max with a higher capacity, and new orders for that are going to be December of this year. Correct. So the Roca sorter is 1,000 card capacity per run. The Roca sorter Max is 3,000 card capacity. We're looking at December for new orders for that. We're still working out details on a formal trade-in program. We do offer something, though, where if you don't want to wait till December, you can lease a Roca sorter for 12 months. And then, once the 12 months is up, you can essentially upgrade to a Max instead of buying your the existing Roca sorter that you have in place. So we do have a program like that, but we are looking to establish essentially some sort of program, and I don't have details or a timeline on that. We want to start getting Maxes out into the wild, and then loop back on that specific topic. So we sell the Roca sorter outright for $22,500 to acquire it, plus shipping, and then there's all sorts of details I don't want to get into here, but happy to talk with you. But that's kind of the base one, to just buy it out. We have a lease program where you can make monthly payments for it, and then you have options to return the machine. You have options to continue leasing the machine for a longer period. You have options to buy and own your leased machine. So we have all sorts of programs like that. That's for the base model. We have the Max. We can go through all those details, but just to give you a number there for an outright purchase, $22,500. The base price on the Max is $32,500 for the Max. We also have some specials here at Gamma if anyone is interested in moving forward this week. It's the capacity. It's that, and the reason that you would care about that as a store owner is if you're able to run 3,000 cards, it means your employees don't have to change the tray after 2 hours or after 1 hour if we're sifting. It's more cards being processed throughout the day. Maybe your employee, a run finishes and your employee's working with a customer. Instead of having to change that tray out, the larger capacity, it's going to keep churning, keep doing valuable work for your business over time. So ultimately, that translates to more cards being processed per day due to the higher capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Roca sorter Max is about a foot wider. If you stop by our booth 101, you can see we have a Roca sorter and a Roca sorter Max for you to check out. But it is wider, a little bit taller, and heavier. But that's 3,000 cards are pretty heavy, yeah.
Cool. We're just about at time. Squeeze one more in if you guys want. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it. Have a good day.